Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Black Theatre Workshops in Conversation with series. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, so it's very, very good to be back. My name is Quincy Armour. I am the Artistic Director of Black Theatre Workshop, and on behalf of all of our team, thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, the 14th of April, and not too bad outside today and here in Montreal. I hope that wherever you are, the weather is good and that this finds you and your loved ones all keeping very, very well. I'm very happy to be here today to have a conversation with these two wonderful people that I'm going to tell you about in just a moment. But first of all, I just want to mention that we are now, as I mentioned, mid-April, over a year into this global pandemic that we have all been dealing with. Who knew that we would be here at this time and the way that things are progressing? It's been hills and valleys for a lot of us, and it's been really hard to be away from family, from friends, and from patrons and audiences. So we just want to send our best out to all of you and hope that you're doing well, taking good care of each other, and crossing our fingers that now that the vaccines are starting to roll out, that things will hopefully start becoming a little bit more normal in some ways, and we can start to begin to see each other and to touch each other and to hug each other. So I'm hoping that's going to be coming up very, very soon. But we have a wonderful conversation today coming up with a fantastic artist that I'm really, really happy you're going to get an opportunity to hear about. This is Makambe K, who is, among other things, the performer and playwright of Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, which is the play that was supposed to be our Black History Month school tour this past season, but because of the pandemic has been postponed. And we also have a guest host talking to Makambe today, Talia Urbani, who I'll tell you a little bit about as well. So nice to have a conversation from these two lovely artists. Before we get to those introductions, in addition to the pandemic that we have all been dealing with, I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge another incident of violence against our community that happened just a few days ago at the beginning of the week. And all of us who are a part of this event today, everyone at Black Theatre Workshop, our guests, everyone backstage, are thinking about Daunte Wright and the family and loved ones of Daunte Wright. And this event today, this event this afternoon from all of us is being done in honor and in dedication of Daunte Wright. Okay, so this is going to be a great conversation, in part because what we're going to be talking about speaks to what is happening right now in the world. Makambe K is a great performer and playwright, and we are going to be able to include an excerpt of the play that you're going to be able to see a little bit this afternoon. But I'm going to let our guest host tell you a little bit more about Makambe. I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about our guest host, who I'm very, very happy is here with us. And as I mentioned, her name is Talia Urbani. Talia is a young artist currently finishing her last year of high school in Quebec, still a teenager. A very, very inspiring one, if I say so myself. Her passions are singing, musical composition, writing, and painting. And having taken singing lessons for over 6 years, Talia has learned to sing diverse musical genres, including the blues, jazz, classical, gospel, and pop. She has helped fundraise for the Haku Project, which is an Indigenous-led organization supporting women empowerment across the Amazon. And she has also done several different causes that are dear to her, including Concert for Kids with Cancer. She plans to continue her training in arts and music at the University of Ottawa. And I am very thrilled that she is here today to take on the hosting duties. So without further ado, I introduce you to our guest host today, Talia Urbani.
Hi, Quincy.
Hello, Talia. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you so much. And I have to say, I'm so thrilled that you are here today, taking on the hosting duties. It's lovely to be able to hand over the torch to someone so young and so talented. How are you feeling going into this conversation today?
I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm so happy, and I'm grateful.
Good, good. Well, we are so great to have you here with us. So that's enough of me. I'm going to go away now. I'm going to leave everything into your very capable hands, Talia, and I will be back to join you and Makambe afterwards for our Q&A in case we have some questions from our viewing public. So I'll go away for a bit, but I'll join you back at the end. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right, take it away, Talia.
Hi, so I'm so happy to be part of this today. Makambe K. Simamba is a Dora Award-winning playwright, an actor for her solo work, Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, imagining Trayvon Martin's last moments. It's a very powerful, moving, and brilliant play. And when it is safe and possible, I can't wait to see it in person. As an actor, she has worked across the country for companies such as Handsome Alice, Chromatic Theatre, Ghost River Theatre, Sage Theatre, and Obsidian Theatre, just to name a few. Makambe is a national award-winning playwright whose work also includes plays such as A Chitenge Story, Makambe Speaks, Mud, and The Drum Major Instinct. She is a 2020-2021 Urjo Kareda artist in residence at the Tarragon Theatre. Makambe is a proud Zambian whose intention is to be of service through her ability to tell stories. Welcome, Makambe.
Hi, Talia, and hi, everybody tuning in from all of your different virtual spaces. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So I'm so excited to be here with you, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And before this interview, I had been doing a little bit of research about you to have a better understanding of who you were, and I could tell how aligned you were with the idea of telling people stories that you wanted to be, to be told. And I'm really curious to know, when did you realize that storytelling was your calling?
Okay, so we're taking it back. I love it. Thank you for this question. I think my spirit was always preparing me to be on this path, but it took me a while to figure out that storytelling and doing that through theater, for example, was like an actual job that I could do and a career that I could have. So the realization that I specifically wanted to pursue theater came, I think, just after high school. In the first year of university, I studied journalism for a year and a half. And I was like, this is cool, but not for me. But prior to that, I had been so connected and so like obsessed with stories and always writing and creating and dreaming. And I remember being a little girl, like maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I used to imagine myself doing curtain calls. And I would be like in my room and I would like take bows to myself in the dark. Like, what a little weirdo. But anyway, but I think that when I reflect on that as an adult, I go, oh, like I was always kind of headed here. So it's always been, I think, my intention.
That's wonderful. I love that. And I've been, especially now, I've realized how our experience in life really helps influence the way we tell stories. And through that, I'm really curious to know how your experience with racism affected the way you approached writing, this piece.
Okay. I think one thing that I became really aware of was that like conversations that I was having about racism, there were always two versions of the conversation. There was the conversation that I would have with other Black folks, and then there was the conversation that I would have with white folks, and they weren't the same conversation. So in terms of specifically the approach that I took and the way that I handled the subject matter within this piece, I think it was a real reminder to myself and an exploration of like, how do we talk about racism when it's just a safe all Black space? When I switched into that lens, I went, oh my gosh, there's so much that I don't have to explain. I feel like I have nothing to prove or protect or defend. I feel like there's a different way I can be present, and I have different needs when I'm just with my community. Whereas when I'm in predominantly white spaces, which have been most of my high schools growing up, I grew up, I'm from Zambia, but I grew up in the Caribbean actually, and then went to school in PEI and then did my theater degree in Lethbridge, Alberta. It's been a little bit of like,
wow.
yeah. And most of those places were predominantly white. So I really have always been thinking about race. Even when I was in Zambia, I remember this one time I think I was in the first or second grade. I must have been around 6 because the way school starts there, like, I don't know if everyone was earlier or just me, but I remember like learning about racism very, very quickly. And I remember being in about the first or second grade, and it was lunchtime, and like it's funny how cliques and like the popular girls and all of that whole culture starts so young. But I remember like never being in the popular squad, but I remember like these white girls at my school. I went to this like kind of bougie international school where like this is where the children of diplomats go, that whole kind of vibe. And I remember these white girls, they were from different parts of the world, but they were white. They had this game that they would play at lunchtime. And the game was, or I don't know if you could call it a game, but I remember we would sit outside underneath like the jungle gym and eat lunch. And after eating lunch, they would make myself and the other little Black girl carry everybody's lunch boxes back to the classroom using the language, you guys are Black, so you are our slaves. This was, I know, it's brutal. So this was 6-year-olds, right? Using this with such clarity. I remember one day, there was a girl who was South Asian who came to join the class. And I remember the day really clearly because there was an argument, because it's like, she wasn't Black enough to be Black. And she was like, I'm not Black, I'm brown. But at the same time, she wasn't white. And there was like, but for some reason, even though I was living in Zambia, like I was in Africa, like that's where Black people are, that's where we're from. And even though I was in the cultural and racial minority outside of the school, within the school, being within like the racial minority, at 6, I already knew where I fit in. And that's not the world that I want to raise my kids in, nor is that the world that I want to live in. So I think that was the first time that I actually really actively remember being like starting to process some of these ideas of race and how Black people are perceived compared to white people, and then compared to other skin colors and cultural groups. And so, I mean, as the way life goes, you're not really conscious of it, like as it's happening. Like I wasn't 6 being like, one day I'm going to write a play. But all of those experiences and feeling them in my body and trying to make sense of what kind of world do we live in where 6-year-olds talk about race and slavery and then enact that on each other.
Yeah.
What kind of world are we living in? So I think those sort of larger questions led me through lots of paths and other incidences to sort of start exploring what eventually became Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. That's a terrible experience oh my God.
It's an adventure. Wow. I always wonder if I run into those girls, if I'll like ever bring it up. But I know I'm not the only person with those stories.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So I heard that you have an excerpt for us that you were going to perform for, Our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers. So I'd be so glad to hear it.
Sure. I'm really excited to share this. Just for anybody who's watching and doesn't know, so I wrote the piece and I am also the performer. So I play a 17-year-old boy within this piece, and it's a privilege to share that with you today. I'm ready to go whenever you are.
Perfect.
The last inhale. A 17-year-old Black boy in a hoodie appears. His body parts isolate and move in a way that is unfamiliar. He tries to control them.
What just happened?
He considers his own body.
I'm hot. I'm wet.
He sees eyes watching him.
God? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me to right paths for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for I know you are with me.
To the eyes.
I haven't been to church in a minute. I just thought I'd slip in a little insurance. Are y'all here for Judgment Day? What is God on Black people time? There should be like a step-by-step instruction manual or...
A large book appears. The boy approaches the book.
Your Journey to the Ancestors.
The book glows and inscribes itself.
A step-by-step instruction manual.
The book inscribes itself.
Open me. Mm-mm.
He walks away. Grandma appears.
Baby, you stand on the shoulders of the ancestors who chose you to represent them in this moment. Open it. Grandma? Aren't you the one who used to force me to go to church? Where's God? And why do I have to? That sperm hit that egg and you were no mistake. Did you just say sperm?
Grandma disappears.
Grandma. Well, I guess God is actually kind of savage. Have you read the Old Testament? He turned a bitch into salt just for looking back. I got another one. God is so savage. Y'all supposed to say, how savage is he? God is so savage.
How savage is he?
Okay. So he hollers at his own boy and tells him to spend like 2 entire months building this huge ass boat. Then he makes him scour the whole earth, gathering all the animals, like 2 of each one and shit, just to be like, I'm gonna make it flood. And it's like, dude, you had the power to make it flood, but you didn't have the power to build your own boat? God is so savage.
How savage is he?
God is so savage. So it's like a Tuesday morning, a couple thousand years ago, right? And God calls up his friend Abraham, right? And he's like, hello, is it me you're looking for? I'm just kidding. That was bad. So he's like, hey Abe, it's me, Lord. Yeah, nigga, what's good? Yeah, okay. How's work? Cool. How's your wife? All right, cool. How's your only son? Great. I'm gonna need you to sacrifice him. Click. And so Abraham takes his fucking kid, drags the little nigga up a mountain, puts him on like an altar or some shit, lifts up this huge ass rock, and just as he's about to smash his head into 1,000 tiny pieces, God be like, just kidding. And Abraham's just like, and then God didn't say nothing else. Savage. Ancestors all the way.
He opens the book.
Thank you so much. That was so incredible. And, watching you perform this, I'm really curious to know, how has all of this journey affected you from, writing this to completing it?
It's been really humbling. It's really lovely to feel like my work is well received. And I feel like I had to grow a lot as a performer and a person and a writer to be able to create this piece, and to be able to create this piece in the way that it needed to be creative. Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012, and I've been trying to write this piece since then. It only came together fully in 2019, because that's when I felt like, that's when I was ready. So I'm really humbled by this journey. And I'm humbled that like it is probably the piece in my entire, I guess, canon that has had the most awareness and like accolades. And that's really exciting for me as an artist. But it's also the one play that I wish didn't have to exist. To me, this is not so much of a play as it is a prayer. So the way that this journey has affected me, it's that it's just humbled me and reminding me how necessary these conversations are, these prayers are, and how much Black lives continue to be in danger despite so many efforts that our community makes to speak out and to create a different reality.
Wow. And what was the easiest part and what was the hardest part for, about writing this?
What was the easiest part and the hardest part? The easiest part kind of felt like, because it's a solo show, there's also a heavy movement and sort of dance aspect that is woven within the piece. So there was something that felt really natural in being able to tap into my own Black body. I went to theater school that was a lot more salt than it was pepper. You know what I mean? It was very white. And so a lot of the opportunities that I had for movement and being in plays, which I really enjoyed and got a lot from, were not necessarily made for me, made for my body. So I wanted to say, like, what does the vocabulary of like 17-year-old like Black boy hip hop look like from 2012? Right? That's Soulja Boy, that's Teach Me How to Dougie, it's like there's a particular energy to me that I feel like lives somewhere in my body. So the easiest part was actually tapping into that, or at least my interpretation of that Black boy joy, specifically at that age. And it felt like impulsive, it felt joyful, it felt like cool, and it felt just like really, really, really rhythmic. That was probably the easiest part. The hardest part was so I say that I feel like because Trayvon Martin's murder launched the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So before Trayvon, Black Lives Matter did not exist in the way that we know it today, where there's like a website and it's like a slogan on shirts. Black Lives Matter was tweeted specifically in response to the verdict that his killer was not guilty. And that's where the language and the movement becoming cohesive in the way that we know it today, that's where that started. So I kind of feel like the hardest part was like having to genuinely tap into the energy of not just Trayvon, but the energy of everybody he represents, past, present, future, and figuring out what ways I could pay respect to this really sensitive topic. A huge challenge that I had was that like so I'm writing a story about a male identifying 17-year-old boy who lives in the United States as a Zambian-born, Caribbean-raised, female identifying person living in Canada. So my experiences and the character's experience, like we do have common ground, we are connected, but I found it challenging for myself I was like, what exactly is the access point that I can get to this that feels like I'm not exploiting and that feels like I'm not disrespecting the memory of a person who lived and disrespecting the legacy that he left and disrespecting his existing family. So because like for us, I feel like, and part of the reason I made the play is that I feel like we just kind of look at these names, Trayvon, George, Ahmad, Dante, Sandra. we look at these names in news stories and on headlines, and we can forget that they're people.
Yeah.
And we end up, we do rally for these people as a community for, the deaths that they didn't choose. But like, I also want to balance the energy by just remember and like humanizing us even in those moments, to like actually focus on the moments of life and focus on how I thought such a character would like let go. So I think it's just been a challenge to really try and do that work from an aligned and respectful place, because it's meant that I've had to soak in a breadth of information, and that information was really, really hard to internalize and to communicate clearly.
And thank you. All of your answers are so beautiful. Thank you. Wow. And I'm curious to know, where's the inspiration for the title come from?
The inspiration from the title comes from the fact that I, as like a female identifying person, have a lot of anxiety about the males in my life that is different from the anxiety that I have for the females in my life. Something that I think it's really important to acknowledge is that Our Father, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers speaks a lot about the Black male experience, but that is not the only experience. Yeah, that's part of the movement. So even though I feel like my piece explores that, it's just really important for me when we have these conversations, and when we have the opportunity to connect, to also acknowledge that there are several Black women who suffer the same fate, and several Black trans folks as well who suffer the same violence. Sometimes I feel like if we only let the movement be about like straight, like Black dudes, that's dangerous. And so I just wanted to say that out loud before I jumped into answering the question. But I just kind of thought about who is left behind when, so now Dante Wright has been killed. Who is left behind? His child, his partner, his parents, his friends. And I feel like within the Black community, there is like a certain awareness and fear for these members of our family, but it felt like it wasn't just, it's not and never has been just about Trayvon, though Trayvon is the lens, because I feel like there's a lot that his spirit offered that we can understand through his story. But yeah, it kind of came from an exploration of like who's left behind in these tragedies, and how do we as communities process these different people who we lose or fear that we're going to lose to this white supremacist violence.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. You articulated it beautifully. Thank you. And how do you feel about the next steps for this play?
I'm excited. I'm really excited when it's safe to do so, to be able to embody the character again and share it with the Canadian community and the global community, and share it with the aliens on Mars. I just feel like everybody needs to engage with some of these concepts in ways that they have not. And specifically, so I made this piece to be a place for Black people to be able to grieve, because I felt like even though it's 2021, we have not fully grieved Trayvon, because the moment that we were starting to catch our breath, it was Michael Brown. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think of like every single time, like it always seems to happen like a lot. Like I go, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Elijah McClain, even though Elijah McCain came before, there's always like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, it always feels like you can't fully grieve anybody because there's always the next thing happening.
Yeah.
And so the movement is important. Being out in the streets is important. Signing the petition and giving people help, that's super important. But at the same time, if that's a spot that's now empty at your dinner table, there are certain things that you have to do to actually hold space for that grief. Otherwise, I feel like it affects our spirits. It's the reason why when George Floyd died, I remember posting on my social media, like, Black people, you have to watch this live stream of the funeral service. Like, you have to, like, we have to find some sort of closure or some way to actually send these people off into the afterlife in a way that it just gets to be about them for a minute, where we as the community can have the space to grieve and, honor the fact that they lived a life, so that they are more than just what a racist white person did to them.
Yes.
Because the energy is not balanced. And I worry that we as Black people get used to only seeing ourselves on the media with like horrible violence perpetrated against us. It's dangerous to not be able to balance that perspective. So I wanted to create a safe space for us to be able to come in whatever clothes we wanted, whatever hoodies we feel like wearing, and baggy pants, and to feel, I want people to walk into the space and hear music that feels familiar. I want people to walk in and see Black faces. I want people to have the space to have the ugly cry if they need to, because this is a space that is specifically created for that. And if white folks or non-Black folks who would like to come in as allies, that's completely beautiful and welcome. But the priority of the space is the Black bodies and the Black grief. So how do we, my question is, like, how do we continue to honor and create space to sort of hold the audience in this very triggering but an important story?
You're so amazing. Wow.
You're so amazing.
Wow. So I think Quincy will be joining us.
Fantastic.
Yes,
fantastic.
I'm here, and I'm going to jump right in to say that you are both so amazing. Thank you, Makambe, and thank you, Talia, for that wonderful conversation. It's so short. I wish we had more time, but thank you both for just your generosity and your openness, and for speaking so frankly about things that are important to us with what's going on in the world right now. So many thanks. For those of you who are watching, if you have any questions for our guests, Makambe K, Simamba, or Talia Urbani, please feel free to write them down into the comments on Facebook, and we'll get to as many questions as we can in the little bit of time that we have remaining. But while we're waiting for some of the questions to come in, I'll ask the first one for you, Makambe. Sure. You've been doing the show already, and I know for a fact that it will be happening again. And I just wanted to ask you, what has the response been like for you, or even the experience for you of doing the show, particularly for younger audience members from our community? What has their response to the show been, and what has your experience of experiencing their response been?
Well, first of all, young people are my favorite because they are the best and also the future. And it was always important for me for this boy in this play to tell his story to his age mates. My experience of that is like, the youth, I find, like, young folks always have the best questions, and they're hard questions sometimes too. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. But it's been, I feel like the show is manifesting the intention that it started off with, which brings me a lot of fulfillment. But I also admit that sometimes that's hard. I remember when the play premiered in Toronto, I remember having a conversation with a teenage boy who was about 15. He had come to the show with his aunt, and his aunt said, "This is the first play that he's ever seen." And I went, "Yes, a play where it's about like a Black boy and he's your age and he likes the music I'm assuming you like, and he moves like you and he looks like you, like, yes. But then I went, oh my gosh, that first play is also the play where the protagonist doesn't get to live at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I hate that we have to be in conversation like this with our youth.
Yeah.
I hate that. I wish I could just write, Sally gets a pony and eats, like, I wish I could write something sort of light and fluffy. I wish I had the luxury, but I don't. So I always feel like I'm kind of going back and forth between like, yes, this feels good, and like, ooh, this feels hard, but still it does still feel like aligned and necessary. And what I think is really important is that I've noticed that some Black teenagers who are very connected to the movement don't actually know that Trayvon started it. So it feels like a piece of very recent Black history that not everybody is aware of. So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to like come and help and fill in those gaps, and to be able to open up conversations. I remember a younger child coming with their parent to the show. I don't remember what age they were, but they were closer to maybe 12, and that the show was like actually an opportunity for this father and child to begin a conversation. So it's complicated, it's hard, but I think that's kind of what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually leads quite nicely into another question that came up that we wanted to ask you about. And, you know, doing a show like this as many times as you've had to do it in the past, question about how do you take care of yourself when you have to tap into, you know, such a emotional story? What is it like for you to have to do the show as often as you do? And how do you manage your self-care when you're performing like this?
I sleep a lot, I drink a lot of water, and I kind of don't talk to anybody. I sort of go into a zone. But I think that the biggest form of self-care that I have engaged in that has helped me maintain an internal longevity that allows me to sort of connect and channel in the way that I need to is actually cleaning up my whole life. And that looks like scrapping the people who are not in line with the ideals of this show. So that means that I've had to walk away from professional opportunities, colleagues, friends, mentors who I can't be myself in front of. I can't own being a Black person in its full multitudes of, like, you know, the colors of the rainbow. Like, there's certain people I noticed I actually was not able to fully be this experience, to fully be myself in front of. I felt a lot of folks who kind of wanted a packaged idea of my Blackness. And so it's, you know, that thing, it's like, it's cool to be Black when we're like doing a TikTok dance or like saying all this, you know, cool slang, but it's less cool all of a sudden when we're getting shot, right? So I had to sort of, and especially having come up in a lot of like, in like really, really white institutions, I had a very white support system, and some of those people just needed to be chopped. Some of those people needed to be released. And there's something about feeling like everyone who comes into contact with me knows that this is what it is, that kind of lifts me up in a general way. So it doesn't feel like so it feels less and less, at least, when I'm in a situation where I feel vulnerable and I need a person, right? When a nap is not enough, when I need to call, I actually have lots of people I can call, not just like the one person, because I feel like I'm creating that space in my life.
That's fantastic. Quick question for you. As much as you know, I love this play and really excited to have it be a part of our upcoming season, which I'll tell everyone about in a little bit. But it's not your only work. And so my next question is, what's next for Makambe K Simamba in the writing department?
The next piece that's like churning my spirit is a trilogy called The Drum Major Instinct. And this piece takes place in a world in which Africa colonizes Europe. It's an exploration of power and an exploration of like what the world would look like if an African kingdom was the dominating spiritual, cultural, and economic force. It's a mammoth imagination and like undertaking, and I'm sure it'll take me a long time, but that's kind of the next big project that's on my heart.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for that, because it's I got a little bit of goosebumps even just hearing you talk about what the vision of it is. Yeah, that's quite exciting. And same question, I'm going to go over to you now, Talia. Wonderful to experience your interviewing techniques for the very, very first time, and I hope that we can continue our relationship with Talia and Black Data Workshop. But I'm going to ask you the same question, Talia. What is next for you after this interview?
Wow, that's a big question. I have a lot of projects I want to do. Right now, I'm working on a book, a fantasy book that highlights people of color, especially people of color who are in the LGBTQ community, because that's something very important to me. There's just so many things that I'd love to do. After this specifically, I'm going to read, and then I'm going to take a nap probably. But yeah. Yeah.
Reading is good, napping is good, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers was intended to be the Black History Month school tour for this Black Data Workshop's 50th anniversary season. Couldn't happen, but I'm so happy to say that the show was not canceled. It has simply been postponed. So we are planning, if all goes well in the COVID world that we are in, our hope is that we can actually return to live performance this coming February, when we will be able to offer live performances of our Fathers, Sons, Lovers, and Little Brothers, written and performed by Makambe K. Simamba. So please look out for that information coming up in the next little while. It would be such a joy to be able to welcome our patrons back into the theater with
I think we lost Quincy
you
for...
there we go. We're all
there.
back now.
Okay, yes.
Thank goodness. Isn't technology wonderful? But yeah, I was just sharing with everyone that in the coming weeks, we're going to be having a little bit more information about what is going to be coming up in the future for Black Data Workshop. But in the meantime, we are just so grateful to all of our supporters, audience, patrons, donors, everyone who stuck with us over the course of 5 decades. And as we're going in 5 decades, wow. And as we're going into the next half century of BTW, we are looking at really taking things to the next level and making sure that we are doing the work that wants to be done, that needs to be done, and is telling us has to be done. So that's where we are. And on that note, I would just like to say, Talia Urbani, thank you so much for being here with us today. It was such a treat to not have to listen to myself for half an hour and to have you in there and to lead a conversation with just so much interest and drive and thought and care and passion. Really felt that coming from you. So much gratitude to you for that. Really.
Thank you.
We'll have you back. And Makambe K. Simamba, thank you so much for bringing to us your wonderful art, your wonderful talent, your wonderful passion about everything, about the world of the theater and the world around the theater. Really, I'm so happy that we connected. I'm so happy to be able to say that Black Data Workshop is committed to producing your work, to producing this play. And my fingers and toes and arms and legs and everything is crossed, that everything is going to work out for us so that it actually can happen the way that we want to do it in February. But I'm going to get babbling. But I'm trying to say, Makambe, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a joy to have you.
Thank you for everything.
It's our pleasure. And thank you to all of you, our patrons. We can't do and wouldn't be able to do what we do if it wasn't for you. So much, much love and gratitude to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Please go to our website to find out what else is going to be going on with Black Theatre Workshop. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. The more the merrier, and that helps us to get the word out. So we look forward to seeing you with other events coming up very shortly. On behalf of the fantastic board of directors and the wonderful staff at Black Theatre Workshop, thank you once again. Be well, take good care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you very soon. Bye, everybody.